Hello, and my name is Deniz Lopez. I am known in the Houston poetry community and writing community as Deniz Decolonize Lopez, and I'm cool with that, all lowercase. First, I want to say thank you to Jaylene for the opportunity to be a part of this project. I'm very honored. Don't know how you heard about me, but I have been in the game for a minute, so I really do appreciate that. So here are the interview questions, and I'm just going off the top, so you can always come back and ask me anything you'd like. What makes your writing unique? I think one thing that people really like about my writing is that I consider it nonfiction poetry, nonfiction prose and writing. Even if I'm talking about something that seems kind of magical or unrealistic, there's actually truth in it. And I love the authors that can really speak to that. It's something that we call magical realism, where we feel that as a culture, especially a brown culture, that we experience this mixture of what is magic and what is actually reality. And the magic happens in real spaces, So you have like these ideas of black girl magic that you hear now. You hear about, people like identifying themselves as witches or brujas. But we're taking those identities back and reaffirming ourselves with them, because we understand that, yes, we are magic. We're magical in our existence, even if it's steeped in reality. So I think that I really like that about my writing, is that there's a lot of symbols in it, and I find that people relate to that because it may not be exactly your experience, but it's these little things within it that make you say, yeah, I know that, because it's something that speaks to the root of you, something that is more spiritual than and faith driven than being steeped in reality, and questioning and being able to find truth within those spaces. I also think that people that what makes my writing unique is that I have a natural kind of ability to rhyme. So even when I'm talking in a natural conversation, you'll find that I have a certain rhythm to how I speak, and it comes through in my work, where certain words match up, certain rhythm. I like pentameter. I especially love iambic pentameter. So I'm always playing with those things, and when you hear me speaking, just like I said, naturally, you find these rhythms, I think, that make you comfortable and make you listen when I'm speaking. And I could go into a whole thing about that and why that is, but it is something that I think when people read the work, it's helpful that it rhymes or that it follows a certain rhythm, because they can read it how I would have read it, and they find that when they come to see me read. Next question. Overall, what drives you and inspires your work? I think it definitely has changed over time, right? And we talk about growth and about being able to express yourself in those media, in this medium. What drives my work really started with becoming an activist when I was in my early 20s in college. And there was this rise of anti-immigrant sentiment. But quite frankly, I wasn't really a person who really could identify myself with the immigrant population. I still saw them as the other. But, being somebody who didn't believe in oppression, I didn't see myself as better, just different. And it was through a lot of exploration of my own history, in college at the University of Houston that I was able to uncover this connection between myself and so-called immigrants and migrant people, and then indigenous people, and then even going back to original black or melanated people. And so, once I was able to kind of find my identity in that, it drove my work. And one thing that I always say too is that when I became involved in activist work in the city, we had meetings all the time. I'm talking about like 2005, 2006, 2008, where you were having these big marches and walkouts happening around the city, around the country, really. And I was going to meetings maybe 3 to 4 times a week, and sometimes those meetings were like up to 2 hours long. And I was, talking to the same people, and there was nothing wrong with that because we were planning things, we were making moves. There was a coalition that came to be that involved many different organizations. The organization that I was a part of at the time, MECHA, which is a national student organization, we were present through that. But I also came to feel like, wow, I spent a whole lot of time talking to the same people. And it's that same, like, I'm talking to the choir type of idea, preaching to the choir. We all know the statistics. We all know the issues, the social issues that are going on. We know the stories. But how do we get away from just talking to each other who already know and get it to this wider crowd of people? And that's when, my love of writing that I've always had, for years, came out again, and in a different way. And I was like, art is the main staple that, it's a non-aggressive way to bring these ideas to new ears and new eyes, and be able to say, I'm going to read you a poem, but this poem is about somebody who I know that is innocent on death row. This is about somebody who's trying to become a citizen of the United States and is finding all this red tape. This is about, a woman who is having a hard time in the sector of being able to bring a child into this world or get comprehensive health care for herself, and these are the kind of stories that we were hearing all the time in these activist trenches. But how do we get them to the general population? So I have a lot of, I still have a lot of stage fright, and I definitely did in my early 20s. Never really had gotten and been on stage to that capacity. I would usually just write, for myself. But I just felt like there was something bigger than me that needed to be talked about and said and brought forth. So that really what drove my work at the beginning. It was like, we have to talk about these things. I have to put this and make it palpable in such a way that people are able to digest what we're saying and not feel attacked and not feel like you're in the middle of a political meeting, and it's boring, but actually, like, how do I say this in a way that it's relatable and it brings the issue home for people? Now I find that, that's still a huge part of my work. When I think about the people that inspire me, it's definitely some fellow poets in the city and bigger writers. But I still look at the Mumia Abu Jamals of the world and the Mos Defs of the world that have inspired my writing, because it's talking about social issues, it's talking about change, it's talking about a perspective that you don't always get. Nowadays, I would say that it's my own life and my experience that inspire my work. Sometimes it's hard to dig into that personal self when you're trying to write something, and I think when I was younger, found it safer to pick a social issue or learn about a social issue and write about it than to dig into who I was and my own identity and the things that I was dealing with. But now, as I've become an older woman, of course, I'm more involved in discovering those things. So like culture, my growth, my identity, the mixing of people, a lot of the ideologies that I had when I was young that I've come to realize were ideologies for a reason, because they're idealistic in so many ways, and coming to terms with those things. So that inspires my work too, and I really hope that, as I move forward, that those things that inspire me will inspire other people. I'm also about to have my first child, so I'm definitely thinking that's going to inspire some work. Okay. How does your Chicana identity offer a unique perspective to things in general? I think my Chicana identity it offers a unique perspective because it's still an underserved aspect of writing, an underserved identity. We don't have that much in media or radio, television, magazines that really speak to who we are. There's definitely been strides for it, but you don't see it in like this mass media still. So having a Chicana identity, gives me the opportunity to speak on things from a perspective that is my own. And I'll go into the next question, which, what does being a Chicana mean to you, to kind of together? Being a Chicana means that I am a brown woman of Mexican descent that is American. And also that it is also a political identity as well, because it means that more than likely I'm entrenched in some kind of social justice. That's what a Chicana means to me. You saw that word come through during the civil rights movement, the Chicano movement. So it was like educated, kind of intellectual brown people that were wanting to really question the status quo of things. So it wasn't just being Mexican American, it was actually being involved in social justice. I know that word has kind of changed a little bit, and it even has for me, and I could go deeper in it, where it's like people that aren't even Mexican can identify themselves as Chicanas or Chicanos. And I think that's cool, because I think it means, again, that we're exploring identity. We're brown people. We're in Texas, a lot of us, I'm in Texas. And also that it means that there's an exploration of an indigenous side, this original side, this idea of being like an original inhabitant of the earth. And no matter at what level you are, that you're learning and you're going there. So I think that that's what Chicana means to me today. I think, like I said, when I was younger, it was a little bit more strict in who was, considered to be Chicano. But I'm totally cool with people that want to call themselves that because of the social justice aspect, or recognizing that indigenous side of themselves, especially Chicana with an X, right? Chicana with an X at the beginning, because that X represents not only, like that identifying as unidentifiable, unmarkable, recognizing that our history has been stolen and hidden from us, much like, the Malcolm X's of the world that let go of their last name because they didn't want the names of their oppressors, but also because the X comes from the indigenous languages of the Americas, and the fact that there was no CH, right? They used X. And it wasn't until colonization happened that the words started to look different and sound different. But Chicana with an X, absolutely love, and I still use to identify myself, even though I would say, and do say sometimes, that I'm Mexica, which is a pre-colonial identity. It's the so-called Aztecs, people of the Americas. So, with all that said, that identity allows me to, I think, view the world in a certain kind of way, and from an aspect that, again, you don't get in the general, like, media. And I think it's something that other brown people are really looking for at this time, when we're definitely part of modernity, and we want to be represented for how diverse we are. Much like our, black brothers and sisters, that there's a spectrum of who we are, and music that we listen to, and things that we're into, and the jobs that we have, and how our families are. So we want to bring those things forth without it being like a stereotype or like a misidentified kind of like thing. So that's, for that kind of a unique perspective. Where would you like your writing to go in the future? I've definitely considered writing more for children, because it's just, I don't know if it's somewhere that people naturally go, but the youth, are so important. And that's something that, when we're evolving and we're creating things, and it's like, this is the bomb, we wanted to strive and survive. We have to go with the new times. And so being able to be, over 35 and still want to be able to touch young people, and reach out to young people and what they're thinking about. People that are like 19 or even 15, or even younger than that. Children, our youth, are the most important things, and we often forget that in our growth. That like everybody's important, and elders are very important too, but young people are the future. So we want to arm them with knowledge and understanding, and it's definitely a sense of spirit that they can grasp to, so they don't have to start all the way over. So I've definitely considered writing more towards like a younger base, short stories or poems that are like more friendly to kids or children. And I've actually considered writing about relationships or like self-help kind of books. I've seen it before. There's like a Latina Bible out there somewhere that has like different baths that you can take, and talks about like forming coffee groups with friends, and just things that kind of help us to, with the identities that we have, get through this life thing and this matrix thing that we live in every day, and find this clarity. So I'm hoping that it goes there. And also just with the mass of work, because I can't even tell you how many poems I have. I've kept them on like scraps of paper and other things. I kept them on a OneNote online digital thing for years, but I would often like write poems right next to each other as opposed to on separate pages. And when I went back, it was like I had over 121 pages of poems. So some of those pages have like 4 or more poems inside of them. So I'm just like, wow. So a lot of my work now has been like breaking that up, especially when I wrote my self-published my first poetry collection, it was like picking out poems that had certain themes, and having to, go and decipher all of those things. But I would love, and it's always been a thing of mine that I, will eventually see through, is to create kind of a curriculum or be able to write even a workshop where I'm taking certain poems from the past that I've written that are historical or have to do with something in our history, and taking those and being able to present them at the university level to have discussions about what happened during those times. What are those line by line? What does this explore? And then being able to have some conscious conversations with students about them and where we are now at any given time and how to move forward. I'm a very solution-oriented type of activist, so I'm not good at being like, this is what's wrong, all the time. Every meeting we have, we're going to talk about what's wrong. I'm more like, we're going to talk about what's wrong or what the issue is right now. And then I want to talk about solutions. I want to talk about spaces that we can create something different from. So, definitely going the university circuit I would love to see people studying the poems and tearing them apart and being like, she's talking about this thing that happened in LA, in 1995, or, she's talking about this justice case and this person that was, murdered by the state. Whatever the case may be, that's where I would like to see my writing go as well. So for those of us who are not Mexican American, can you elaborate on why it is such an active community? Okay, well, the Mexican American community, again, like when you look historically, for one, especially being in Texas, we're so close to Mexico. And when you talk about assimilation and acculturation, I'm so glad that you know that word. We are the hardest. We're some of the hardest to assimilate to the American status quo. Where some of the acculturation is much easier, right? Because we have, Tex-Mex, we have fusion. But when it comes to assimilating us, where it's all hot dogs and apple pie, that's a little bit harder for us. And it's because I think it's so easy for us to still see and feel our original culture, language, identity. I mean, quite frankly, we're still on what was originally Mexican lands, and even before that, indigenous lands, that there was not a European in sight. So, we are still so active in trying to find ourselves again, because one thing that I definitely feel has happened to us is that so many of us don't know our true histories. So we're always in this state of like, you don't know who you're dealing with when you bump into a Mexican American. You don't know. This might be like an all the way right wing Trump supporter in front of you, or it might be like the most down, earthy, hippie-esque, sage burning person over here, and you don't know. So it's like this identity that has gone through a lot, that has taken on a lot of American culture, and so we're always like shifting and trying to find like where we fit in. And you're gonna find Mexican Americans in all aspects, so that whole spectrum of that. And we're here, right? Like I said, we're in Texas, so you're definitely gonna see this Mexican community anywhere that's a border town, And I had a professor at university who's now in California, Professor Luis Alvarez, who taught borderlands and taught Houston in particular as still a borderland. So you think about those things and how we take on these identities. And even for people that are not Mexican American, they're engrossed in this culture that they're not even aware that this is how it originates. This is that you're entrenched in a Mexican American type of life simply because of where you live. So I hope that answers the question about it being an active community. Like, I've been in many different circles, like artists, musicians, and like I said, you find us in all these different sectors, business, shaking hands with the governor. It doesn't matter. Like, we're there. Again, though, I think the identity is something to be questioned, is still something to be explored and brought forth so that more people that are non-Mexican American can understand who we are and how we got to be who we are now. So you could understand like this far right wing Trump supporter and how they got there as much as a hippie-esque sage burning person, right? Your blog post from July 17th that is titled Love, Trust, Fruit, y Más. Where did the inspiration for this come? Especially the love and trust section. Okay, so I did have to go back and look at that because one thing I've noticed about my blog is that it doesn't give years. So this blog was actually written, I believe, in 2015. And if you know me, which you're just getting to know me, then you would know that I've studied, like I said, the first level to me was this Mexican American identity. Then came this indigenous identity. Then came this original person identity, which goes all the way back to like the original first man and women. And that came about because I was actually, through MySpace, this is how long ago it was, met a person who was part of this lifestyle, is the best way I could say, that is called the Nation of Gods and Earths. They are a subset. They were a break off from the Nation of Islam. So they were like black identifying, or black people who had a certain understanding of, they used a supreme alphabet and a supreme mathematics in order to explore their identity and in order to get through their day. So if you're a fan of the Wu-Tang Clan, many of them are part of the Nation of Gods and Earths. They're also called the 5%ers. And you hear in this a lot of original hip-hop music where they talk about the day's mathematics. So that's where that comes from. Well, like I said, one of the things that they also use is this idea of supreme alphabet. So every day, every date of the year corresponds with a certain identity or like a certain theme. So there's also a supreme alphabet. Every letter in the alphabet consists of you can use it to create words. You can use it to create like a name or other things. So that blog that you're talking about, July 17th, Love, Trust, Fruit, y Más, and more. Both of those writings, love and trust, is love was broken down into acronym, right? So linking our vibrational energy. So you think about the ways that like words can be broken up letter per letter, and you can create these other ideas out of it, because what else could be true? Love is about linking our vibrational energy, right? So we're all connected as human beings on a spiritual space. So, love is that. Love is being able to tap into that energy and making sure that we're identifying and finding that link. So those pieces cosmically connected glimpses of recognition, the kind you find in each other's kind eyes. Searching eyes always find these sparks of thought, links, as in branching fractals that still somewhere meet or branch off and continue to create others. So it was definitely about, how do we see each other? And when you look at another person, do you see the God within them? Do you see that vibrational energy that creates you and animates you for your day is also the same energy that animates them? Whether you're like a religious person or not, which I call myself more in spiritual, but where you're like, I can see you in myself. And so that was like an exploration of that. And also just what I was learning at the time through the 5%ers, which is that life has patterns. And so this idea of fractals and how things branch off, like if you're looking at a tree, the way that branches break off and go in different directions, and it might look like it's chaotic, but there's actually a science to it and a science to everything. So that was love. And then trust, was talking respectively and understanding selfless ties. Trust, right? Talking respectively and understanding selfless ties. So that's like being able to have respect for people, allowing another being to exist without expectation, without, feeling as though they need to be controlled. So that was kind of what that piece was about. Allow me to move freely as I do you. No ego or envy, a whole bunch of follow through. More than noticing beauty and acting upon it, it's placing the energy and finding a well fit. So again, like, instead of trying to mold someone into what you want them to be, and that's where the idea of trust comes from. It's about, I can let go and allow you to be who you are. And that's really true trust. And it, respect, this selflessness, letting go of expectations, and a whole bunch of follow through is like, you judge somebody based on their commitment and how much they do reciprocate. But it's not an expectation. You just notice the difference, right? So that's what that's about. And I love the idea of acronyms and being able to create different things. I have another poem called Peace that I have in my book, and it's probably like the shortest poem that I ever wrote. And it's I have this book by me, so I could find it if I can quickly. But if not, I could tell you about a different one. Fear. The idea of fear is false evidence appearing real. When you break down by letter and you're able to make something that makes sense out of the alphabets, then you're like, yeah, that is what fear is. It's this false evidence appearing real. It's usually based upon something that hasn't even happened yet. Something that you're making up is make-believe. But the funny thing about fear and anxiety is the fact that when you go there in your emotions and you're still releasing those toxins as if it is happening. So even though it may not be happening to you, when you're thinking about and you're worrying about what may happen, then you're still putting your body and your mind through those things. So you have to remember that fear is actually false evidence appearing real. So you can just let go of the make-believe and stay in the science and the truth of things in order to have clarity. So again, like, these poems, these ideas came through at a time when I was definitely exploring this 5%er mentality, and I was seeing it, manifest for myself, because that blog, I'm talking about how, like, I've grown community gardens, I've been on stages, I've been in marches, I've done all these things, but a lot of those things had fallen back to something that I was working on, kind of like in a cave, just with my partner, my business partner, and it was all real radio. So it's a good segue, because we're about to talk about that in a little bit. But so thanks for reading that post. If you had to slap a label on your work from the following: class, language and identity, assimilation and acculturation, feminism, which one would you identify with? I think from all of these, I would probably look at language and identity the most. Class is definitely a thing, but I have found that, like, a lot of the conversation around class is still very much steeped in, like, non-people of color exploration. I hope that makes sense. So I feel like my work is more about language and identity. I do mix English, Spanish, and Spanglish, and even some Nahuatl, which is a pre-colonial language, into the work. So when you're reading it, you may have to, like, look and, like, be like, what is she talking about exactly? And learning and using context clues, and also being able to play with language like that, right? And be like, I can put this Spanish word in here and then the English word, and it still rhymes and it still has a certain vibe to it. So I definitely enjoy being able to do that. And then identity, right? Because the last time I did a reading at a university, it was HCC for their Mexican Independence Day month, or like whatever. I'm telling you, I don't ever really like I feel like, just like Black History Month, like, it needs to be 365, right? It needs to be every day of the week, of the year, that we're talking about this every week, every month. But it was like, whatever, that September, that month span where we celebrate Mexican identity. And I was reading from my collection, and I was really reminding these kids how much I've changed from when I've written some of these poems. And if you have the book, then you're able to, I think, see that. So I would say language and identity, because we're always ever changing. And that was something that I kept telling those students, like, write whatever you want and whatever you think, and don't worry about the fact that a couple of years from now, maybe 2 years, maybe 5, maybe 10, hopefully, when you look back at some of them, you're like, 1, dang, I'm a good writer, and 2, wow, was, I've changed a lot in my own thinking. So I would say language and identity are definitely labels that I would add on to my work. Self-exploration, self-care, identity, indigenous identity, minimalism. Those are some of the others. So the next question is, how does your radio show, All Real Radio, help to relay your message? And why did you choose the radio show? So actually, All Real Radio is a radio station, and my show on the station is called The Mitote. So the All Real Radio was actually, I'm the co-founder of All Real Radio with this gentleman who was named Anthony Mills, better known as Zin, Z-I-N. And he was in radio for 14 years and he was also an activist, loved music. He was one of the only DJs, or maybe the only DJ, playing conscious hip-hop, soul, etc. And also during a prime time on an FM station. But, he wanted to do his own thing. And so fusing that idea with the fact that I loved independent media, and that I felt like, again, through art and independent media, you're able to reach people in a different kind of way that they're not used to. And when people are feeling lost, they try to find these alternatives to what is already out there. So our radio is a station. It has several other shows on the station. It's a 24/7 station. But I didn't start doing a show on the station until about 2016. And this was after Zen passed away unexpectedly. And we had talked about me doing a show before that. And he was like, when you gonna do it? When you gonna do it? But I definitely started the show because I wanted to, again, like, give my perspective. And also, the mitote actually means a moment of clarity amongst chaos. They talk about it in the 4 Agreements, that book, a little bit. But it's kind of skewed in the way that it's talked about. So it is the chaos. But again, like, you exist within it. So that's really what the show is about. I will interview different people that I know in the community, all colors, all aspects, that are doing things in the community. But when it's just me, I feel like that's really when it shines as well, because I'm able to just pick different themes that are part of our everyday lives and build on them and talk about them from my perspective. And I get to pick out music and play music that people generally wouldn't hear or don't hear, that are like by indigenous hip-hop artists, or that even like people that I know that are recording artists, and put that stuff out there. So, I love that. And we control the media. It's ours until somebody comes and tells us, we can't do it no more. We control every aspect of like what goes out and what is spoken upon. So it's kind of hard at times to manage those things, at the same time have my own show and also do other things with my life. But the station as a whole, we're moving in new directions, and I have more people in place now to help. And after these couple years without Zen, that I'm very excited about and ready to just move into a new scope for the station. And it is in Houston, and it is in 3rd Ward. If you wanted your readers / listeners to remember one thing, if nothing else, from your work, what would it be? Ooh. I think that the main thing that I want them to hear is to remember that we're all connected. And that more than anything, you have to find peace in yourself. There's, like I've said throughout, there's so much going on in the world. There's so many different ways to label, identify. There's so many things to experience for so many of us. And a lot of times it can feel like it's so out of our control. And that is a difficult thing to wrap your heart and mind around. But the reality is that we control and can control a whole lot more of the universe than we think. And it really starts with having a sense of self and a peace within yourself. So how can I explain this better? A lot of things go on in the world, and you may feel like all these things are happening to you, but it's really the real test, the real thick of it is how you react. So yes, all kinds of situations will come into your life and your mind, and you do have to deal with them, but it's not really about the things that happen to you, but it's how you get through them, and how you hold on to your sense of who you are through everything you go through, positive and negative, the ways that it shifts you or doesn't, or the way you react, especially in a tense, hard situation. It's about how you react. So I want people to remember that we're all connected to each other. Every day that you open your eyes, that means that some unidentifiable something in the universe has given you this new breath, and you have this ability to make this day your own. And like I said, we can't control the things that happen to us, the fender benders, the unexpected deaths, people that we think we can trust that, hurt us, or relationships going awry, or whatever. We can't control those types of things, but we can control the way that we react to them, and how we, and it's really all based upon being able to have self-love, self-identity, learning your history, knowing who you are, and being unapologetic about it, right? Because some people have and may still have a problem with the way that I identify myself, or the people that I relate to, or that, my station seems like it's more towards people of color, or whatever the case may be. But it's about me being able to sleep at night, right? And being able to know who I am inside of myself, because I just have to answer to myself and my loved ones, at the end of the day. And like I said, you want to be able to put your head down at night and sleep. So everything you do is, it comes from you first, One of the things with the Nation of Gods and Earths, again, is that, there's a sense of you are the ultimate creator. Creator gives you that gift in this life to be a creator. So the things that you manifest in your life, again, is like all based upon what your thoughts are and what your actions. Your words can be used for trickery, but you hope that your word is bond, and the things that you're saying to people are actually in truth, because people will remember those things and judge you based upon them. So yeah, that's what I want them to remember. If they remember one thing, like, about the work, is like, here's somebody who has been on a journey, is on a journey, like I'm on a journey, and we can explore those things, and it's okay to be wrong at times, as long as you're not being hurtful, but always question, and always explore, and always look for the alternative. Yeah, I probably said too much about what I want people to remember, not just one thing, but yeah, we all have our own experiences. So explore those things. All right. I've been trying to fight a little bit of a cold, so I think it's starting to come through because I've been talking so much. But let me read this piece for you. It's kind of hard to pick what to read, but one of my favorite poems, and it is part of my poetry collection. It is in the section called About the Author. It's called Victoria. And again, it's like a play on the way that words and themes kind of like are reoccurring in our lives at different times, and sometimes we don't know why there's this connectivity. But as I was going through my life and have been, this was one of those things that kept coming up, this word, this name, Victoria. So I'm going to read this, and this is one of my published pieces, one of my favorite pieces, and there's a lot of history and identity and a lot of like self things I've been through talking about in here. But again, hopefully it's something that you hear and you're like, I get that. So this is Victoria. Victoria, put you to my lips, carry me back to Turkey Torta Heaven in Mexico City, where down the street we could hear a band of blind musicians giving it their all for a huge crowd that gathered. Danza and bellyache soothed by you, my first time holding you, tasting you, Victoria. I come back to you every time I eat at that Mariscos place off Wayside Drive by that golf course that is totally in the wrong neighborhood, but has been a part of that neighborhood since before me, I think. Drum beats, Victoria. Where I passed through on trips to see family across the white man's border to Monterrey, would get excited to see the sign. Over time, became the place where they forgot about those 19 Mexicanos in the back of a truck, and my heart tugs mad hard when I think about how all the ones that lost their lives were men, are hombres, and I get reminded of sweat lodges where I got to hold hands with my grandmother and saw symbols through darkness, sweat, tears, that I realize eventually were mine. And I think of the beauty and the horror, their lives and mine, tan fina, tan fuerte, Victoria. The place you had land and stakes in, right? And the theme of land comes up again, and I wonder why anyone would ever sell it. The most important thing in this life besides this life, la tierra, where I toil and soil and I don't mind the cactus spikes in my palms too much. Victoria, with the K. Revolutionary still. Lit a fire up under me with your words and maybe the cinders of your bridal gown that you recanted over pizza. The one you burned for the sake of you, for the spoken word we love, for connections and sisterhood, reminded me of the fact that my friends are a reflection of me and how much I want to know you more. Victoria, with one name, takes me everywhere I love and connects me further, all the way from the core of my soul to the beams that beam across the grid of existence. Just the utterance of your name. Carry me to cobbled paths, aching feet, your dark features, sweat, revolution, tierra, me, sip, sip, Victoria. Thank you so much again, Jaylene, for this opportunity, and I hope that I answered your questions well. And if you have any other questions, feel free to get at me and let me know. And I've really enjoyed this. Thank you for your questions. And Ometeo, I hope.